Good evening, everyone. Have you had a good day? You know, there were certainly a lot of memorable comments that were made during the day. To me, the best was the description of the intersection of the Industrial Revolution and the digital revolution. And the expression was when bits become atoms and atoms become bits. You know, and I did my engineering degree a long time ago, so a lot of things obviously have changed, but I'm going to have to think about that a little bit, bits becoming atoms and atoms becoming bits. But anyway, it was a tremendous day. It's really my pleasure to welcome all of you to a special evening at this year's conference, hosted by the Rockefeller Foundation as part of their Centennial celebration. The Global Philanthropy Forum, as you probably know by now, is a project of the World Affairs Council of Northern California, and my name is Peter Robertson, and I'm chairman of the board of the World Affairs Council. The Rockefeller Foundation was an early member of the Global Philanthropy Forum and has remained a steadfast supporter. And we're delighted with the opportunities we have to continue to partner together with that great organization. If you don't already know it, you here tonight make up the Global Philanthropy Forum, a network of individual philanthropists, social investors, and foundations, big and small, who are committed to strategic global giving. You share a commitment to making social impact bigger, better, and faster. And in looking at the most effective ways to make a difference, you look to collaborate and to learn from and connect with one another. The year 2013 marks 100 years since John D. Rockefeller established the Rockefeller Foundation. And I can't resist it. I spent most of my life in the energy industry, in the oil and gas industry, and you need to know where the Rockefeller originally money came from before you give me a hard time, as you usually do at these conferences. Anyway, the innovation made possible the chartering of the foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, in 1913. And it's been leading by example ever since. It enabled the establishment of the field of public health, the green revolution in agriculture, and continues with development of impact investing today. These initiatives and more have led to vast improvements in health and nutrition and have touched millions of lives and maybe billions of lives. Strategic philanthropy in its modern form is the key to solving many of today's problems. We heard from Rockefeller Foundation President Dr. Judith Roden this morning about how sustainable agriculture and adequate nutrition for the world's growing population remain a concern, despite the successes of the Green Revolution. In the face of 21st century challenges and opportunities, the Rockefeller Foundation remains committed to building resilience and facilitating more equitable growth by continuously searching for new ideas and new ways of building solutions to these complex crises. The Foundation's Centennial gives us a perfect opportunity to not only look back and reflect, but also to look forward at these pressing global issues. So now I'm going to ask you to please turn your attention to the screens for a short video presentation that helps set the stage for tonight's celebration of the Rockefeller Foundation and of strategic philanthropy.
Where I sit in Silicon Valley, the future is big data. There are more bits of information in the cloud now than there are stars in the universe.
But it cannot be a responsibility of only the children in the school, only the community, only the families, only the business sector, only the financial sector, only government. This is something, it's got to be a new mode of thinking.
In this era of globalization, the problems are evolving more quickly, they're more contagious, and things change more rapidly, so we're going to have to change the techniques and the practices.
Not one organization, one government, one private sector foundation can make the difference. And I see what they're doing is figuring out the synergies, the possible solutions, starting the conversation, and then putting that conversation into action.
great how kids like us can make a difference throughout the world through small microloans.
Yeah, what a great organization. Now what I'd like to do is to introduce or to invite Dr. Wiebe Boer to the podium. Since 2010, he has been CEO of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, an Africa-based and African-funded not-for-profit dedicated to the promotion and celebration of excellence in business leadership and entrepreneurship across Africa. Prior to joining the Tony Elumelu, they made me say that twice. Prior to joining the Tony Elumelu Foundation, Dr. Boer served as an associate director with the Rockefeller Foundation's Africa Regional Office based in Nairobi, Kenya, where he managed a broad portfolio including including climate change, agricultural development, impact investing, China's engagement with Africa, and impact outsourcing. That's pretty impressive. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Wiebe Boer.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure tonight to be here to introduce my former boss and mentor, Dr. Judith Roden. It's also interesting how, even though you've worked with someone, when you actually have to think about how to introduce them, you actually learn a lot of new things. And one of the things I was wondering is, how do you actually, what is the title you give to someone who has 18 honorary doctorates? I don't know if I have to say doctor 18 times, but for tonight I'll just say Dr. Judith Roden. So Dr. Rodin was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and received her undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania and her PhD from Columbia University. So 2 Ivy League institutions weren't enough, so she moved on to Yale, where she distinguished herself as a very popular lecturer, but also as a renowned research psychologist, working on areas such as behavioral medicine, women's health, and focusing on issues such as obesity, long before they became large national issues. After a career as an academic, she then moved on to become an administrator, first serving as the chair of the Department of Psychology at Yale, then becoming the dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and finally becoming the provost of Yale University. In 1994, she was then elevated to the national stage when she was appointed as the first female president of an Ivy League institution, as the president of her alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania. And over 11 distinguished years at the University of Pennsylvania, she transformed the school from a ranking of 16th to a top 5 ranking in the United States. But that wasn't quite enough. And recognizing the problems often associated with universities and their communities, the town and gown dichotomy, she also used the revitalization of the university to also transform inner city West Philadelphia into a model of urban renewal that has actually become a global benchmark. In 2005, since one city and one university weren't quite enough, she was then elevated to the global stage when she was, again, became the first woman to be the president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Her time at the Rockefeller Foundation during her time at the head of the Rockefeller Foundation, she developed a model for philanthropy and for global development, which she has coined as smart globalization. There are so many things that, through smart globalization and through her 8 years at the helm of the Rockefeller Foundation, that she has done to really shake up not only the foundation, but the entire philanthropic sector and the world of economic development, that I really can't name them all here. But I did want to highlight 3 areas that I think she's particularly changed the way the Rockefeller Foundation and also the whole world of philanthropy engages. And the first I would say is that she has elevated the status of someone leading a global philanthropy to one as being the thought leader at the highest levels of the world on the most pressing social issues of today. And anytime you go to any major global meeting or global event, it's very likely that you'll see Dr. Rodin there. And it doesn't matter what the topic is, whether it's agriculture, climate change, impact investing, whatever. And she'll be there speaking passionately, knowledgeably, probably sounding like she knows more than anybody else, but always at the forefront, thinking of the most poor and vulnerable, for which she has become the global advocate. So the first one there is kind of raising the profile and raising the role of the leader of a global philanthropy to really that level globally. The second is that she brought a new kind of person into the philanthropic space. So she would create teams where we had scientists and strategy consultants, fund managers and activists, people who normally would never be in the same room, let alone on the same team. And she'd throw them in together and say, okay, solve this problem. And the outcome was actually pretty phenomenal in the different ways that everyone looked at issues and the different solutions we came up with together. And it's because of that that many of us came into philanthropy that otherwise we likely would not have. And I think many of the results of that are here today. Many of us have now left Rockefeller, but we're now leading philanthropic institutions in different areas. And then the third area, and again, this is just three of very many, is her role in breaking down the silos, not just in Rockefeller, but across the philanthropic space. She did that within sectors, so that, for example, in agriculture, the folks working on agricultural production would also talk to the guys working on agriculture marketing. It seems obvious now, but that wasn't always the case. Then further, she would get the folks in agriculture to talk to the folks in healthcare, recognizing that the problems of the 21st century are incredibly complex and that you actually need to work across disciplines to solve them. And then finally, within that, she also even broke down the barriers between the social sector and the private sector through the work of impact investing, where through leading that global effort, started bringing billions and eventually trillions of dollars of capital into spaces that were traditionally reserved for the social sector and also the public sector. So let me conclude by just saying this. When John D. Rockefeller established the Rockefeller Foundation a century ago in 1913, his objective was pretty simple, though very ambitious. It was to promote the well-being of mankind around the world. And as the Rockefeller Foundation now enters its second century of doing just that, I can confidently say that the foundation and the entire philanthropic community is in very good hands. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Judith Rodin.
Thank you. A really incredible and very generous introduction. I appreciate it. And so great to see all of you here. It's a privilege to be back at the Global Philanthropy Forum, and especially meaningful for me. As you see, we are at our centennial. Actually, we're 1 month and 1 day away from the foundation's birthday, but who's counting? And it's not just any old birthday. As Wiebe mentioned, we're turning 100 this year. Although to tell you the truth, we don't feel any older than 99. In fact, we feel as nimble and flexible and full of energy as we did at 25, except we have a little more wisdom and a lot larger endowment. In this land of high-tech startups and young billionaires, 100 might seem downright ancient, but actually we take great pride in our age, and in all seriousness, 100 is a tremendous milestone, and I can't tell you how thrilled and privileged my colleagues and I feel to be leading the institution that we do during this period. And we're grateful to be able to celebrate with you, 400 friends, both old and new. Jane, thanks to you for your leadership of this great organization and to bringing us together. On driving over from San Francisco, I was looking out the window and thinking of what our founder, John D. Rockefeller, might have seen looking from his own window out on the bay a century ago. Certainly fewer Google shuttles, for one thing. But some things are remarkably the same. The Victorian architecture and the painted ladies, the raucous Barbary Coast bars, filled now with dot-commers rather than seafarers, entrepreneurs who were seeking their fortunes, although now with venture backing and angel investors. One notable absence, the Golden Gate Bridge, had yet to take its place along the landscape. In fact, John D. Rockefeller would pass away 5 days before the Golden Gate Bridge opened for traffic in May of 1937. He always dreamed of living to 100, but he was 2 years shy. So maybe we will take up this celebration in his honor, but celebrate tonight more than our founder's vision or a single institution. Indeed, we see our centennial as a celebration of all strategic philanthropy, of the organizations and the people and the ideas that have made this century of philanthropy so successful. And we thought, what more fitting a way to celebrate our birthday and a century of strategic philanthropy than to do what many centenarians have been known to do at their own parties, hold you captive in your seats while we ramble on down memory lane. I'm only kidding, of course. Well, actually, I'm only partly kidding. I did bring along some photographs, including this one of John D. Rockefeller Sr. and Jr., as well as some memos and letters and other artifacts from our archives, which I believe are really compelling in telling the story of strategic philanthropy. For the younger folks in the crowd who are used to aging their photos via Instagram, I have 2 words for you: no filter. It's been a privilege to be able to see what the curators and the historians at the Rockefeller Archive Center have unearthed in a massive undertaking to build our Centennial website. I say massive because if you were to take all the files and the letters, the strategy memos, the photos, the trip reports, and the journals that have all been saved over this century and stack them upright, they actually stretch for 2 miles. The visionary efforts of our forebears to meticulously preserve these materials has enabled us to learn from history while it happened. And as historian David Carr said in an article in the Harvard Business Review on the importance of understanding your own organization's history, and I quote, "The present gets its sense from the background of comparable events to which it belongs, discovering or rediscovering the story, picking up the thread, reminding ourselves where we stand, where we have been, and where we are going." What has emerged to us so clearly is that while the challenges facing the world have changed dramatically in these 100 years, the attributes that have made philanthropy so successful in helping to provide for their solutions are indeed quite timeless. So I'd like to take just the next few minutes to walk you through a bit of that history, to see what lessons continue to apply to our work as philanthropists today and into the future. Because in order to talk most productively about the future we make, we must first endeavor to understand the history that has made us. For the Rockefeller Foundation, as you know, that history began in 1913 when our charter was granted by the state of New York with the mission to promote the well-being of humanity. We were not the first to be given this kind of charter. Andrew Carnegie had been granted one 2 years earlier, and with it, the Carnegie Libraries and the great Carnegie institutions in the United States were born. But our founder, John D. Rockefeller, had his eyes on the whole world and would focus his giving on addressing the root causes of the world's ills, as he called it, the search for finalities. His team coined this new kind of giving as scientific philanthropy because they tested, they tried what we would call innovation today. And indeed, for decades, philanthropy would be the only kid on the block doing this kind of work. Until the emergence mid-century of development organizations and multilateral organizations, and indeed the infrastructure of civil society, and now the social enterprises and startups that we know today. All of us in this room do philanthropy of one kind or another, and we think of ourselves as strategic philanthropists, and we do it in different ways, and the excitement of being here is how much we can learn from one another in real time. And so I want to just talk about 4 core elements that I think philanthropists and philanthropy have in common that we've gleaned from reviewing our history, and I think we all share this. The first lesson is that philanthropy is the go-to partner for risk. Indeed, when we look back over our history and pinpoint the moments when our philanthropy has been the best, it is always at those moments when the work is the hardest and the risk of failure is the greatest. Want to experiment with a new spray that might kill off the local mosquito population of an entire island, Sardinia, and then eradicate malaria, but no business will take that risk? Call it philanthropy. Want to map the cultural monuments and artifacts across Europe to prevent Allied forces from bombing them during World War II, but your own government won't pay for it? Call it philanthropy. Indeed, risk is our calling card. It's what our philanthropic dollars, at least in the United States, are tax advantaged to do. And because of this, we can and we should take risks that no others can. Unlike governments, we don't live or die by the polls or the next election cycle. Unlike businesses, we don't measure success in the next set of quarterly earnings. In fact, I'd say that risk-taking is one of the ways that philanthropic organizations do hold ourselves accountable to our stakeholders. There's no innovation without risk, and there's no risk without the possibility of failure. Let me give you just one example from our history. In 1928, George Hale, an astronomer and an inventor, approached the Rockefeller Foundation about the possibility of funding the construction of a 200-inch telescope. If successful, it would be 4 times as powerful as the next largest one in the world and dramatically expand our knowledge of the universe. Sounds pretty great, right? And it will only cost $6 million. Might sound like a steal now, but at the time, $6 million was more than any Rockefeller organization had ever awarded to a single grant. And there was no promise that the fused quartz that Hale planned to use to construct the glass would work. So it was a high amount of risk, but the reward, quite literally in some ways, the universe. In the fall of 1928, the grant was approved and awarded to Caltech, and after years of work and $600,000 already spent, the fused quartz proved infeasible. Even after Corning Glass in New York was called in to apply their new form of glass, Pyrex, there were problems mounting the large mirror. And then there was the matter of transport, which took 16 days in a slow-moving train, and then the mirror had to be polished, which took several more years. And then World War II broke out, and all the work came to a halt. The Hale telescope at the Palomar Observatory would not be fully operational until 1948, 20 years after the proposal was received. But it opened the heavens to exploration and discovery. Would we have the same patience today to continue funding a project such as this? Perhaps not. But that appetite for risk, that impulse for experimentation lives on. The boldness of the MacArthur Foundation in reforming our juvenile justice system. The boldness of the California Endowments Campaign to support the successful implementation of the Affordable Care Act in California. The boldness of the Grameen Foundation to empower the world's poor through microfinance. Risk comes in different forms with different rewards and different implications for failure, but it must always be part of our approach, as it has been ours for 100 years. A second point of difference and strength of philanthropy is our ability and our legacy of creating and building and defining entire fields. The story of the Rockefeller Foundation's field building is not maybe polite dinner conversation. It involves a 2-inch hookworm and outhouses. But the Foundation's effort to rid the southern United States of hookworm would be among our most paramount achievements. And not just because it was successful in eliminating the disease. You see, this particular infection was passed through bare feet in unsanitary conditions. And we discovered that in addition to treating the disease, wiping it out required improved sanitation and education that would change hygiene behaviors on a massive scale. And that's exactly what we did. We helped create what would become a new field, the field of public health, and the public health system that we know today. Our philanthropy has helped to spark countless other new fields, molecular biology, a term coined by Rockefeller Foundation's Warren Weaver, which endeavored to apply the same rigor of chemistry and physics to the study of the biological sciences. Area Studies, which was the first interdisciplinary approach to world cultures, combining language training, geography, anthropology, history, economics, and political science, supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation, the Ford Foundation, and the US government. The field of public administration, which sought to increase the competence of people working as civil servants at the state and county and local levels. The list goes on and continues still today. One contemporary example in our work, and we have many partners in this work, is the current development of the field of One Health, which is making critical connections between human medicine, veterinary medicine, and environmental studies to better prevent and control infectious diseases that we now know can pass from animals to humans and spread quickly around the world. SARS, H1N1, for example. There are many other examples from institutions in this room, from the pioneering work of the Ford Foundation in instituting the field of public policy research and analysis, to the Skoll Foundation's work to develop the field of social entrepreneurship. But not all fields are planned so deliberately by program staff. Often, our talent in philanthropy is in spotting a compelling idea, even if we don't fully understand it at the time, and then giving it a chance to blossom. In 1955, the Rockefeller Foundation received a proposal to fund a conference of mathematicians and machine learners at Dartmouth to be held the following summer. They had even coined a new term, artificial intelligence, to help the Rockefeller program officers better understand the nature of their studies. At the time, the foundation was actually quite hesitant to fund this gathering, noting in its response, this new field of mathematical models is still very difficult to grasp clearly. But they went ahead and they awarded the funding, the sole philanthropy to do so, because the officers at the time found the mathematicians themselves so compelling. The conference would come to be regarded as the Woodstock of artificial intelligence. Anyone, everyone who was anyone in computation and machine learning was there. Over the course of our field building experience, we came to understand two important realities. The first was that often government involvement was critical, as we learned in our work in public health. The second was that in order for sustainable, lasting impact, there had to be trained professionals with the knowledge to advance these new fields, which segues nicely into the third strength unique to philanthropy, and that is investing in people. Despite the advances that the Dartmouth Conference would bring to computational sciences and all the hype around Google Glasses, there is still no machine that can match the power of human ingenuity to solve truly human problems. And therefore, backing brains has always been part of philanthropy's strategy. In our early years, the Rockefeller Foundation invested heavily in fellowship programs, particularly in the area of medicine and public health and the natural sciences. But it also invested in scientists and increasingly in practitioners at the top of their fields to help them carry their ideas into innovation. This, too, can be inherently risky work, as the foundation would quickly learn. In 1925, Hideo Noguchi, a respected Rockefeller scientist from Japan who was known for his advancements in the study of syphilis, believed that he had developed the first successful vaccine for yellow fever in his laboratory. In reality, Noguchi had created a vaccine against a bacterial infection called Weil's disease, not yellow fever. But regrettably, he would be infected with yellow fever in his laboratory work and die a few months after the discovery was made. Despite his error, though, he is the only Rockefeller-funded individual that I know of, at least, to be depicted on his country's currency. The vaccine would eventually be developed a decade later by a team led by the Foundation's Max Thaler, who would be awarded the Nobel Prize for his work in 1951. Such is the nature of innovation that we are privileged, all of us are privileged as philanthropists to fund, often an incremental process of improving upon others' invention. The Rockefeller Foundation has been proud to support more than 220 winners of the Nobel Prize over the course of this century. But also countless others who would push knowledge and fields to new limits. Norbert Wiener, a mathematician who wrote the seminal text and firmly established the field of cybernetics. H.W. Florey, who developed the clinical use of penicillin. And when a young Albert Einstein sent a request for $500 to the Rockefeller Foundation, one of his top lieutenants said, "This is interesting." Rockefeller looked at the work himself and said, "Let's give him $1,000. He may be onto something." In the 1950s, betting on people. In the 1950s, we funded the work of a community activist named Jane Jacobs to write The Death and Life of Great American Cities, which would redefine how we thought about urban life and urban areas. Today, all of us in philanthropy continue to invest in the power of human ingenuity. Amazing things happen when you bet on people, including entire transformations. And that, of course, is our fourth superpower as philanthropy, the ability to bring about transformations that not only disrupt, but at times uproot entire systems and save millions of lives. The most obvious example from our history is our work on scientific agriculture in Mexico, which would develop the seeds that launched the Green Revolution and fed more than 1 billion people. We see these transformations in modern-day philanthropy, from the Gates Foundation's work to rid the world of polio, which could save hundreds of millions of lives, to the work of Omidyar and Rockefeller and others involved in impact investing and innovative finance to unlock trillions of dollars in private capital to improve the lives of countless people worldwide. But with this ability comes great responsibility in all of our work to grapple with the big moral issues of our day. Let me share one example of how we've been called upon in the past. By 1933, many scholars and artists, most of them Jewish, and some who you see here, were losing their positions in Germany under Hitler. Through its special research aid fund for deposed scholars, the Rockefeller Foundation placed many of these individuals in universities in the United States and Canada, in England, France, and the Netherlands. By 1940, the program had placed 214 deposed scholars. Nonetheless, a program staff memo dated June 3rd, 1940, and entitled "If Hitler Wins," laid plain the implications of the escalating war, and noted that in case of a Nazi victory, concentration camps and extermination may well be the fate of persons with capacity for independence and leadership. In light of these realities, the program changed course and its name to the Emergency Program for European Scholars. It arranged for nearly 100 more scholars and their families to come to the United States and take up positions at top US institutions. While the stated mission of the program, as approved by the board, was to save science and scholarship from fascism, it is so clear from their diaries that the program officers understood and were wrenched by the life and death decisions that they were making in deciding who to bring and who to leave behind. Many added their own money, and some diverted foundation funds at risk to losing their jobs to do more. Today, threats manifest in different ways, but we must remain acutely aware of their consequences and our potential role in mitigating them. From the death tolls caused by rapid global spread of infectious disease, to the impact of inequality on life expectancy, to the fierce and deadly storms that hit some of our most populous cities, to the slavery and trafficking that we talked about this morning. It falls to all of us, to those of us in this room and our institutions, to continue the search to solve the world's problems by providing the risk capital that oils the wheels of progress, by speaking truth to power, by listening and by valuing the input and ideas of our grantees and the populations we serve, and striving to build their individual capacity for transformation, and by never, never losing sight of the gifts we've been bestowed by those who have done this work before us, those who, whether it was changing the entire machinery of benevolence or building the world's most powerful telescope, never let the way that things had been done before preclude a better way to move forward, who never let reality get in the way of aspiration, and who took the time to write it all down so that we may learn from their successes and their missteps still today. And so in closing, I encourage every one of us not only to continue doing this amazing work, but to return to our organizations with a zest for capturing and for recording not only our decisions, but our thinking and our stories and our processes. Because 100 years from now, the challenges of a 22nd century world will undoubtedly be of different textures, but these same threads with our care will endure. And if we do it well, it will be because of all that we have learned and passed on. Thank you.